Hey everybody, I am Carolyn Byers. I'm the Education Director at Madison Audubon, and today starts week 3 of our summer camp. Hooray for Herps! It's Herp Week, everybody. I can't wait. All right, so if you're just joining us now, summer camp is a virtual summer camp called Forces of Nature that we're doing this summer. It's 4 weeks and we're doing it twice. So we're already on week 3 of the first session. Week 1, birds. They were beautiful. Week 2, mammals. They were marvelous. Now we're on week 3. Hooray for Herps. Next week is going to be all about insects, and that's going to be super fun too. I don't know a lot about insects, at least compared to what I know about birds and mammals. So that's going to be a fun one for me, for sure. Okay, so if you go to our website, madisonaudubon.org, you can find everything you need to know about our summer camp. It's free. You don't have to register. You can jump in at any time. If you do want to register, though, for our Super Explorers Club, now's the time to register if you want to be in the second session of Super Explorers Club. You can find out more on our website. It's going to be great. Okay, so I'm going to pop over to our Facebook page real quick and just make sure that I can see all of your comments. My phone still is not allowing me to see those, and it's very frustrating for me. So I'm going to try to find it right now. I'm looking. So if you have any comments, anything you want to share, if you're just a kid in camp and you want to say, hey, I want to see it, type it in the comments so I can say hi to you. This is Trixie. I don't want to do that. Okay, so today we are doing all about herps. Here we go. Got it. Now I can see your comments. Let's see who's here. Piper, hello, hello, Piper. Angie and Elba and Anders and Angie all say hi. Noelle says hi. Maya says hi. Hi to all of you. I'm so excited you're here. All right, so today we are learning about herps, and they are a really big group of animals. And I should back up for a second. So herps is actually a shortened word for herptiles or herpetiles, depending on how you want to say it. And herpetile combines reptile and amphibian all into one. It's an amazing group. And because we wanted to fit everything in during our summer camp, we decided to do herps together, reptiles and amphibians all at once. So when we talk about herpetiles, we're talking about reptiles and amphibians. And a herpetologist is somebody who studies herps, just like an ornithologist is someone who studies birds, and a mammologist is someone who studies mammals. So this week we're all going to be herpetologists. Make yourself a little badge if you want to. All right, so herps have skin, scales, scutes, which is what you call parts of a turtle shell. They can lay eggs or they can give birth to live young. Amazing. And most of them don't care very much for their young. They don't, they may care a great deal about them, but they don't take care of them. They usually just lay eggs and then leave. This is a really huge group of animals, so I can't talk about all of them right now because we only have a few minutes here. But there are about 10,000 species of reptiles in the world. Now, if you remember back to Bird Week, we said there was maybe 10, maybe 18,000 species of birds, and that difference is because scientists are using genetics to learn about birds now, and that's sort of changing the way we look at the numbers. But there are only about 5,000 mammal species. So 10,000 reptile species is a lot. That's pretty cool. But in Wisconsin, there's only 35 species of reptiles. But 35 is a pretty big number for reptiles, especially considering we don't have really any deserts. And there's a lot of reptiles who live in deserts and very dry lands. All right, so we have snakes and lizards and crocodiles and turtles all falling into this reptile category. But the super cool thing that not many people know is that birds, their closest relative is a crocodile. And so if you're talking about it taxonomically, which is a big word, that's how scientists classify animals and sort of draw pictures about how the animals are related to each other, sort of like a family tree. If you're thinking about it taxonomically, birds are actually a member of this class, which is super neat. I love that. All right, so that's who's in the reptile group. Okay, now let's talk a little more about those reptiles. So reptiles, they lay eggs, and they have something called an amnion, the membrane. It's a membrane in the egg. And this helps keep the egg from drying out. And this is part of the reason why birds are included in this group, because they have this layer too. I have a special guest for later, and he's trying to climb out of his cage right now. Get excited. Okay, so reptile eggs are really important or special because they have a leathery or a hard shell, and that keeps the eggs from drying out. And that means that reptiles can lay their eggs on land, which is kind of a neat adaptation. And some of them, like some snakes, they give birth to live young, but they do start out inside of an egg, inside their mom. And also something cool that reptiles do is they have internal fertilization. So they breed a little bit differently than amphibians do, for sure. All right, so we talked a little bit about their eggs. Remember this, because we're going to talk about how amphibians are different later, okay? Their skin is covered in scales, and this helps also keep them from drying out. So remember we talked about the covering on the egg that keeps the egg from drying out? Reptile skin keeps them from drying out too, and this lets them live in many, many places, places where there's not much water, so that, you know, they might risk drying out if they didn't have such fancy skin barriers. All right, and so they have scales, or they have skin, or they have or rough skin, or they have a shell like a turtle. All right, and another neat thing about reptiles is that they can produce toxins, and that they're able to inject into other animals with their teeth or scratch in with their nails. So they produce venom, and there's a lot of confusion about what venomous versus poisonous means. So if something is venomous, it means in order to hurt you, they have to bite you. If something is poisonous, it means if they're going to hurt you, you have to bite them. There's a really great cartoon I saw once where a snake bites a frog, and the frog is giving the snake its poison, and the snake is giving the frog its venom. I should find it. I'll try to find it and post it in the comments. Okay, and so we talked about their eggs, we talked about their skin. Both of those things help keep reptiles from drying out. And the last, well, there's a lot of cool things about reptiles, but the last one I want to talk about is they breathe air through their lungs, just like we do. So they cannot breathe underwater. They have to breathe air through their lungs. Okay, so those were some cool facts about reptiles. Let's think about some reptiles that are in Wisconsin. So I have my Turtles and Lizards of Wisconsin book, and I want to show you one of my favorite turtles. Where'd you go, favorite turtle? All right, I want to show you the Blandings turtle. And I've only seen a couple of these, but they have a bright yellow chin, and the way their mouth is, it just always makes them look like they're smiling. They're one of my favorites. They have a pretty high shell, but I just love that bright yellow chin. So that's one of my favorite reptiles in Wisconsin. And these turtles, if you look at their range, they're found in a large chunk of the state. I know that that's backwards for you. But they're state threatened, which means they're a little bit rare. They need our help. So I really like helping them cross the road. All right, so let's talk about amphibians. So amphibians, if you remember, there are about 10,000 species of reptile in the world, okay? There are only about 8,000 amphibians, but 90% of those are frogs. Most of the amphibians out there are frogs. That's really neat. There are 19 species of amphibians in Wisconsin, almost 20. All right, so amphibian, it means that they live a dual life, the word amphibian. And they metamorphosize as they grow. So they start out in what's called a larval state, which just means they're young. And as a larval state, they live in the water. So if you think about frogs, they start out as eggs that are laid in the water, and then they hatch into tadpoles. And tadpoles live in the water until they grow arms and legs and their tail shrinks, and then they're able to live on land as an adult. And all amphibians go through changes as they grow up, okay? And let's see, we talked about how reptiles have eggs with that hard or leathery shell on them, and that helps keep them from drying out. Amphibian eggs they don't have that layer on them. So they're coated in almost a jelly, and they're laid in the water. Sometimes they're laid in ponds or lakes. Other times they're laid in vernal pools, which are they're bodies of water. They're small. They're like really big puddles. And they're only there for part of the year, and then they dry up. So those places are really safe because fish can't live in vernal pools because the water dries up and the fish would have nowhere to go. So amphibians lay their soft jelly-covered eggs in water to help keep them from drying out. They need the water. So after they hatch, the young live in that body of water that they hatched into. And we talked about how reptiles only breathe air through their lungs. I'm laughing because there is something that turtles do, and sometimes when they're hibernating, they're able to breathe a little bit through their cloaca, and a cloaca is actually their butt. So science is tricky because you try to say something, there's always an exception, but I like it. So reptiles mostly, they breathe through their lungs, but amphibians, when they're young, they're in that larval state, they have gills to let them breathe underwater. And as adults, they have lungs to let them breathe air above water. Okay? And so the last thing I want to talk about for amphibians is that they have, instead of having scales or a shell over their body, they have much soft, smooth, and a little bit slimy because they need to stay wet and moist. And their skin is also what's called semi-permeable, which means that things can get through their skin, like water and sometimes oxygen and sometimes chemicals. So we have to be really careful about what we put into our environment, what we put into our lakes and other bodies of water, because it can get into amphibian bodies through their skin. So their skin is something that's really unique and special about amphibians. All right. So we talked about how amphibians and reptiles are different. How are they the same? One of the really big things that's the same about them is that they are ectothermic. Everybody say ectothermic. So there's a word in there that I really recognize, thermic, thermal, and that makes me think of temperature. So ectothermic means they cannot control their own body temperature with just their body. So they are cold-blooded, meaning that they have to change their behavior in order to change their temperature. So if a reptile or amphibian is too cold, they might move somewhere that's a little bit warmer. And by that I mean they might walk over into a patch of sunlight, or they might get out of the cold water and go sit on a warm rock. And same thing, if they're too hot, they need to move their body or change their behavior to cool off. So they might go in the shade, they might go in a nice cold tunnel underground, they might bury themselves in the mud. That's the one I would choose. I think that would be fun. So they are ectothermic, cold-blooded. All right, so I am going to check the comments out really quickly to see if anyone has anything to say, and then I'm going to bring out the friend that I brought. And I know that we did not look at any pictures of amphibians like we looked at a reptile, but I have an amphibian to show you. All right, let's go peek. Lucia and Rosie say hi. That's awesome. And Noelle says hi. I don't know if I said hi to Noelle before. Hi, Noelle. All right, who's ready to see our amphibian? I am. So I have our amphibian, and it is a he. I can say that without just picking a gender. I know that he's a he. This is our tiger salamander, and we have a whole video just about him. It was when we first started doing videos, so the technology is a little not as good as it is now, but it's a pretty fun video. So I'm going to take him out of his cage, and I'll show him to you. But he's a tiger salamander, and he is our teaching tiger salamander. I'm actually going to get my hands a little bit wet because his skin is salamander skin, and I don't want to dry out his body. So now my hands are nice and wet, and they're very clean. So I think that it is a wonderful thing to safely, carefully, cautiously pick up reptiles or amphibians that you might find, but you need to be really respectful of the animal. So always make sure that your hands are clean, that you're handling gently, you're not handling it for too long because that could stress out a wild animal. If they're not handled very much, it might be a very scary thing for them. So always think about what's best for the animal when you are thinking about whether or not to pick it up, okay? And obviously keep yourself safe too. There are the snakes that do have venom in Wisconsin are very rare, but animals will bite, so be careful when you pick one up. So somebody asked me, is this your pet? And I would say yes and no. So this is our teaching salamander. So usually he lives at the Madison Audubon office, and he's being a little shy right now. He lives at the Madison Audubon office, and he goes and visits classrooms and community centers with me. And usually I have him walk around on a towel for kids, and sometimes if it's a small enough group, they get to touch him with one finger. But he teaches a lot about amphibians, about animals, and about water quality. So we use our salamander to talk about road salt in the winter, and why we should keep our lakes and wetlands clean. But this is not a pet, and I do not recommend keeping reptiles or amphibians as pets, just because the pet trade has done well. There's a lot of good things that breeders have done for animals in the wild, but also it's really hard to know where your animal came from. So you don't want to have an animal that was collected in the wild, because that can really hurt wild populations. So he's not a pet for that reason. So this animal came to us because, he was found in the basement of the house out at Goose Pond that the land stewards live, and Goose Pond is our sanctuary. And what happens is these guys will dig down deep during the winter, and like 12 feet deep, very deep. And they hibernate there. And sometimes they end up in the basement at that house. And in the beginning of winter, it seems like a very good place for these salamanders to live. It's pretty wet. There's some bugs down there. But then as the winter progresses, it dries up, and a lot of salamanders die there. But by that time, it's too late to move them. So one year I called up our sanctuary manager and said, hey, do you have any salamanders? I would love one to teach kids with. And they said, oh yeah, there's 3 or 4 down there. Let's come on over. We'll take a look. So I went out the next day, and this was actually the only one left alive. All the other ones had died already. So that's the only reason I feel good about keeping him as a pet, because he would have died otherwise. And he gets to teach a lot of kids. So this, yes, Kathy says wildlife are not pets, and that is true. But remember that a lot of pets that people keep as pets here are wildlife somewhere else. So really only animals that are domesticated, I think, should be pets. And that means like dogs and cats, and a few other things. Anyway, somebody asked, what's its name? And we have had this salamander for about 3 years. So he's about 3 years old now. And he didn't have a name for a very long time because, well, I just didn't think any were good enough, and I wanted to find one that was inclusive, not exclusive, one that lots of kids of all different backgrounds could connect with. I just couldn't think of one. And after COVID started, I brought this guy home to live with me because, well, I'm not going into the office anymore, and I wanted to make sure he kept eating. And he was home for about 20 minutes, and my kid named him. And my kid is 3 years old, so I'm sure a lot of the parents out there can already guess where we're headed. But this little salamander's name is now Dirty Smell. He doesn't smell, and his tank doesn't smell. But my kid thinks that he's always dirty because he climbs in the mud, and, well, he's not wrong. He's definitely dirty. And I don't know why the smell got added on there, but this is Dirty Smell, everybody. Dirty Smell, say hi. Oh, it won't focus that close. There we go. This is Dirty Smell. And so I know it's a boy because he has 2 little bumps right here. And the females, I should say a male. I know he's a male because of those 2 little bumps. The females are a bit smoother there. And this tiger salamander is dark on top, and he's got yellow belly. Well, he's got spots on his belly and a yellow throat, and he has some spots on his back. And a lot of other tiger salamanders are much brighter in their yellow coloring. So he might get a little brighter as he ages, but he might just also be a little bit more camouflaged. And I think that's pretty neat that they all can look a little different. And can you see his throat moving? That's where he's breathing. And you can see his 4 toes on his front feet. Let's check his back feet. 1, 2, 3. Hey, stop moving. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 toes on that back foot. That's kind of neat. So who else has questions? Oh, people are saying, hi, Dirty Smell. Hey, Dirty Smell. So we have an entire video all about Dirty Smell and where he lives and what he eats. So you should go check that out if you want to. And I actually need to feed him some more worms. We've been trying to feed him from worms in our garden, but it is getting very hot and the worms are headed down deeper. Ooh, Dirty Smell is gonna fall. Don't worry, my hand was right here. And so I actually had to go buy worms for him yesterday because the garden worms were just too deep for me to get to. So I need to give him some more worms in a little bit. All right, so I am going to put Dirty Smell back in his little cage. And don't worry, the cage that I showed you a second ago is just his travel cage. He has a very big cage with lots of room to dig and hide. But I need to put him in his little cage when I'm getting ready to teach with him because otherwise I always end up digging to the entire bottom of the cage to try and find him. And it's very stressful when I need to teach at a particular time. Okay, I'm going to clean my hands off just a little bit. All right, Jovi and Evie say hey. Oh, you have a snapping turtle out by your house. That is really cool. Oh, and Angie's offering compost worms for Dirty Smell. I would love that. I'm going to send you an email about that. Thank you. That's very kind. Anyone else have any cool herps near their house they want to share about? Frogs or maybe lizards. Lizards are pretty hard to find in Wisconsin, which is why our herp week doesn't focus on them too much. What about frogs? Does anyone have frogs near their house? I have near my house, but they're good. I have to walk or drive to them. I can't just I can't see them from my house. But I really enjoy frogs too. I like all their different songs. Okay, I want to talk about all of the things that I'm excited about for this camp. So the first thing I'm excited about is today's scavenger hunt, looking for things that herps might eat. So I drew my own scavenger hunt in my nature journal, and my son and I are going to go and try to find these things later today. So I have the things that snakes might eat, which are rodents and slugs and a fish And an insect, I drew a cricket. I also have things that frogs and turtles and salamanders might eat. And later I'm going to let my kid color these in, and then we're going to go look for them. We probably won't find any fish. There are no opportunities for fish in our neighborhood, but that's okay because you can't find them if you don't look for them. So what else am I excited for? There is a really cool frog call quiz online where it will play you, or this website will play you a few different frog calls, and then you get to choose which ones you think you hear. And I've linked some really cool resources about frog calls so that you can listen to them ahead of time and try to learn them. But I love taking quizzes like that about nature things. I'm a big nature nerd for sure. I also really want to make I want to do turtle races. So if you don't know what those are, you're going to get to make your own little turtle cutout shape and put it on a string. And when you jiggle the string, it moves along the string. So if you have a few people doing it, you can race them and see who can get there faster. I've also really been loving sit spots. I think it's fun just to take a moment to sit outside and see what nature is around you. I spend a lot of time hiking and looking for animals, but all of that is very active and very like moving and going out to find it. And sometimes I think it's a really nice change to see what you find. I'm sorry if anyone else is seeing that. Let's see. So some people in the comments say they rescued a bullfrog from her backyard yesterday. He was hiding in the hydrangea leaves. That's great. I hope you put it in a good spot where it's going to be happy. Someone else said we have green tree frogs and toad babies and adults. That sounds like a wonderful place. I have only ever seen tree frogs when I'm out hiking, and I've never found one on a tree. I only find them on plants. Usually really big plants like mayapple or Jack in the Pulpit when it gets big. That's really great. Lots of, baby toads and frogs. It is hard to tell when they're very small. I like to look for, toads have a gland on the back of their head. Let me see if I can find you a picture of that gland in my field guide. It is called a parotoid gland. That big lump there, that's a good way to tell it's a toad. And then frogs, they have a tympanum, and that's where their ear is. So there are definitely large things behind the eye of each of them, but this one is very large. It's large and lumpy, and this one is smaller and round and smooth. So even if they're very small, I think you can still see that and identify toads versus frogs that way. Let's see. Lots of good amphibian sightings. That's cool. All right. Well, I am really excited about Amphibian Week. Well, not Amphibian Week. Oh my goodness. Sorry, reptiles. I didn't mean that. I'm excited for Herp Week. And I can't wait to see what you all make. Like maybe a little origami frog. Okay, so I want to say thank you to everyone who joined in today and who commented and shared their sightings with me. If you have pictures from you and your kids doing things in Mammal or Bird Week and you want to share them with me, please do. You can add them in the comments here or email them to me. I'll add my email address in the comments so you can find it. It's carolyn.byers@madisonaudubon.org. And I can't wait for Herp Week. Let's all go find some herps. As always, our programming is free and open to anybody, anyone with an internet connection. So if you have the means and you want to support us, I'll add a link in the comments where you can go and donate. Every little bit helps. And if not, this will still be here for you as a resource because everybody needs nature right now to relax and spend some time safely away from other people, just regrouping. So have some fun, enjoy summer, enjoy the herps, and I'll see you soon. Bye.